the meeting of the Tax Increment Financing Study and Formulating Committee. I'm Councilmember Bob Mendez, and I'm going to give a couple-minute preview of what we're doing here today, and then we're going to have a presentation from MDHA. So to set the stage, back in 2018, the Metro Council passed legislation creating a tax increment financing study and formulating group to look at how tax increment financing was used in Nashville. And even though it's only 4 short years ago, at the time, all but one TIF deal, tax increment financing, ever in the city's history had been through MDHA. That's changed in the last 4 years, but at the time, it was to look at tax increment financing done by MDHA. The committee that was created was designed to cover all angles of people related to TIF. There was an affordable housing person, there was somebody who had been a chair of MDHA's board, there was a developer who had received TIF loans, there was somebody from Metro Finance Department, there was a lawyer who was accustomed to documenting TIF deals. So there was the idea was to get all the angles to the table and be able to make recommendations. I was fortunate to be the chair of that committee, and we ended up issuing a unanimous report in May of 2019 that had several recommendations and observations, and ultimately led to legislation being passed a few months later in August of 2019. What we're doing here today is following up on the recommendations, and some of the legislation led to work done by MDHA, and that's what they're here to talk about. Before we get to them, though, I would like to just share some of the observations and a few of the recommendations from the unanimous report, because they guided the work that's been done in the 3 years since then, and why we're here today. The observations, and you can, if you Google Tax Increment Financing Study and Formulating Committee report, you can find this report and an entire library of information that we pulled together that I'm confident is the single most comprehensive set of information on tax increment financing in Nashville, if you ever need help sleeping and want to read through that. But here are a few of the observations. Observation number 3, the goals of each redevelopment district are unclear. State law requires that the purpose must be to address blight. However, infrastructure and affordable housing are frequently cited as additional goals of certain districts. Observation 4, the city's goals for a redevelopment district may shift before the 30-year term of a redevelopment district is complete. Number 6, while beginning to improve, there historically has been inadequate collaboration between MDHA and Metro Finance to analyze and predict the impact of TIF on future Metro operating budgets. Observation 11, there is currently no agreed upon methodology to assess the impact of TIF or redevelopment districts. And then observation 13, enhanced opportunities for public review of and comment on proposed TIF projects will strengthen confidence in how the tool is used in Nashville. Based on these observations, the committee made a series of 17 recommendations. 2 of them are relevant for today that I'll read briefly. Recommendation number 11, MDHA and Metro Finance should create a methodology to complete a fiscal impact analysis for individual TIF loans exceeding an agreed upon threshold. The committee suggests $3 million. And then observation 12, or recommendation 12, the Metro Council and MDHA should amend redevelopment district plans to require a periodic assessment of the impact and goals of each district, and require that the council and MDHA agree in order for new TIF loans to continue being made in a district after the assessment is done. The amendment should allow the periodic assessment to be requested by either the council or MDHA anytime after 7 years, but it must take place at least every 10 years. So in response to that report in August of 2019, the council passed BL 2019-1645 that followed through on many of the observations and recommendations that I just went through. And importantly, for 8 redevelopment plans that MDHA administers, the amendment from this bill requires that periodic assessment to take place regarding a review of the impact and goals of the plan, and also to require agreement between the council and MDHA regarding what activities and improvements are eligible for tax increment financing under the plans. And so big picture, what we were unanimous on is because goals can drift over time and might change through the course of 30 years, we would do this periodic review to get a sense of whether the district was working, whether it was having a positive impact, and requiring a new consensus between MDHA and the council in order to keep going. And a lot of that was driven from the widespread sense throughout the county that maybe tax increment financing was a good idea at the front end of the Gulch to kickstart development, but maybe by the last couple loans, maybe it wasn't needed anymore, and was that a good use of tax money? And there wasn't consensus on that. So it's, I repeat that context just to remind, because it's been a few years, the committee hasn't done any work since May of 2019, thank goodness. I guess the last thing I want to mention was that legislation in 2019 included a provision that first reassessment had to happen by June 30, 2022. Otherwise, the ability to make new TIF loans in a district would stop. And, we've had mayors and finance directors and legal directors and council directors have all turned over more than the council has, new leadership at MDHA. So that and COVID, by the way, and a flood and a tornado and I don't know what else. So that work got a little bit behind. But what we're going to hear about today is the assessment of the impact. And MDHA has done that work, and they're here to talk to us about that. And with that, unless one of the couple committee members we've got here wants to say something, we'll turn it over to MDHA. All right, guys, thanks for being here. Dr. White.
Thank you, Chairman Mendez and members of the committee. I am Dr. Troy White. I'm the Executive Director of MDHA. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. With me, joining me here at the table today is the Chair of our Board of Commissioners and former Mayor Bill Purcell. Also in the room are MDHA's Director of Urban Development, Joe Kane, and the Assistant Director of Urban Development, Matt Loftus, and our consultants, who did a deep dive into the metro redevelopment districts that use TIF financing as required by council ordinance that you will hear about shortly. The report by its nature focuses on the past. As you will hear, different administrations have used TIF differently based on the needs and the challenges of those times. MDHA, the current administration, and Metro Council are tasked to decide what priorities Metro should place on the use of TIF in the future. As part of the TIF study, there was a survey completed. And the TIF survey had 4 areas of priority that the Board of Commissioners for MDHA approved. Those priorities are affordable housing, transit, including pedestrian and greenways, infrastructure, and historic preservation. In general, what the study shows is that by the measures selected by the consultants, our redevelopment districts have had were successful. Property values in the districts have increased beyond increases in Metro as a whole. What the study cannot show you is whether the development would have happened with or without TIF. It's the but-for test. But for TIF, would this have happened? This is something that we all can debate and discuss and have opinions on in hindsight. I would ask you to take time to hear the consultants and flip through the report, and keep in mind that the future priorities should impact the choices that may best fit Metro's finances. Before I turn it over to the consultants, I would actually love and have the pleasure to turn it over to Mayor Purcell so that he can provide you some perspective on TIF. Mayor Purcell.
Thank you, Dr. White, and Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and members of the Metro Council. It is an honor and a privilege always to be in this chamber, to be in such good company as it was to serve as your mayor from 1999 until 2007. I'm especially pleased to have MDHA staff here, and recognized, I would add, because she was out of Dr. White's line of sight, that Jamie Berry is here, who is the communications director of MDHA, and in so many ways is the face of MDHA in our work. Neither Dr. White nor I were in our current positions at the time that this important work was done by this committee and then by the Metro Council. I'm very thankful that so many members of the committee are here. Charles Robert Bone, who not only served with distinction on this study group, but also served as chair of the board of MDHA during the critical early period of implementation of the recommendations of the committee, and Bert Matthews, whose family has been so involved with the development of this city and is so knowledgeable from his own experience with the work that he was studying and the recommendations he was making. Dr. White is exactly right, Mr. Chairman. There is no study that in and of itself can completely define what occurs in the life of a city over time. It also, however, does give us the data that we need in order to understand what has happened in the past and make the decisions that need to be made going forward about the important priorities that are before this council, this city, and this administration. I do think it will help us make better decisions in the future. I think this study did just that. In the years that followed the 2019 issuance, not only did the council take action, as the chairman indicated, but as MDHA staff worked their way through the recommendations that applied to a wide variety of concerns regarding transparency, regarding methodology, regarding certainty. These have been addressed, and a lot of that occurred during the time that Charles Robert Bone was a member of the board and then ultimately the chair of the board of MDHA. Dr. White and I then come to this new into the work of this committee, but not new to the work of in public housing, or frankly new to the importance of TIF in that process. One of the things that we do know in this room and in this city is what TIF can do and what TIF has done. In 1999, when I came into office as mayor of Nashville, between 900 and 1,000 people only lived in the core of downtown Nashville. MDHA had attempted with 2 smaller developments on Church Street to prove to the market that there could be housing in downtown, and the market had yet to respond. There was an aggressive effort by MDHA and by the city at that moment in time to begin placing TIF into those developments which would prove to the market not only the ability of the market to provide housing, but also to provide affordable housing. Using TIF during that period of time, beginning with the Viridian, moving down to Encore on 2nd Avenue, across the street at Stallman Building, over at 5th and Main, this city and MDHA used TIF to make the case to the market. And in fact, during that time period, because of TIF, nearly 2,000 units of housing were created in the core. We know, as a result of the market's understanding of what could happen, that today, in a neighborhood where 900 people lived, 15,000 people live. Less than a generation later. And there are another 7,500 units, I believe, generally it's agreed, are in the pipeline now for that same exact neighborhood. And something very similar occurs as you go down Main Street in East Nashville. We know what TIF can and has done. And I think informed by that, and Dr. Paulette Coleman, who was a member of this committee and is also a member of our board and could not be here today, is very knowledgeable and very much involved in the notion that we can and should have priorities as I think literally literally everyone involved in this process went. Dr. White stated them. They are approved by our board recently in anticipation, frankly, of this meeting and the important interest of the Metro Council to list our priorities publicly and firmly: affordable housing, transit, including pedestrian greenways, infrastructure, historic preservation, and resources. It wasn't just, obviously, for housing alone, because it can't be, but in the case of Rolling Mill Hill, it was a blighted area. It was 30 acres of land, and we invested in the infrastructure there, which made possible the development of all that's occurred. In the Railroad Gulch, the same. In fact, the numbers in the Gulch were, actually, I found them for this purpose. It was $8 million in the Gulch initially, and it was $12 million in infrastructure in Rolling Mill Hill. But in both of those neighborhoods, as the chair remarked, it sparked a transformation of a neighborhood that led to other changes, many of which will be reflected in this report today. It's not just about downtown, it's about the whole city. We know that as well. The reworking of the redevelopment districts from here all the way down Jefferson Street, which was also implemented during my time as mayor, and then on out, in fact, to the area at the airport. All of these districts have opportunities. The new transit-oriented development legislation, the other opportunities that have been created in the other areas where pilot or other programs can be utilized are all part of the puzzle as we go forward. But today, we are pleased to bring to you these consultants who've had an opportunity to look at numbers from their perspective, not knowing all that we know, but hopefully informing us in a way that allows us to make the decisions that this city wants and needs us to make, and I have every confidence that we will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Mendez. Yeah, my name is Abigail Ferretti, and I'm a principal with Partners for Economic Solutions, and I'm joined here by Anita Morrison, my partner at Partners for Economic Solutions, and we're excited to be here today to talk about the results of our analysis. As was previously mentioned, we started analyzing the fiscal impact of tax increment financing based on the requirements from this committee that was established by Metro Council, and we were hired to look at that fiscal assessment and also to create a tool to analyze the fiscal impact of tax increment financing for the future and moving forward. And so we completed our study in June of 2022, and these are the 7 districts that we focused in on. So these are the districts that you see on the map here. These districts were founded as long ago as Capitol Mall, which was in 1978, based on redevelopment plans. And we took a look at all 7 of these districts. So you can see the purple on the upper right is the most recent one that we looked at, which is Skyline, and all the way down on the bottom left-hand corner of the map, which is the Art Center, Jefferson Street, Phillips Jackson, Capitol Mall, East Bank, and Rutledge Hill. And these redevelopment plans that we used to look at obviously had the major public infrastructure, the historic preservation goals, redevelopment, and the like being emphasized in their plans, and the TIF loan dollars were used to fund that. So just to be clear, for those folks who aren't maybe here today and are joining remotely, we always like to take a moment and do a 101, how does TIF work? It's a tool to leverage private investment. I think many of us understand that. It's not a new tax. It's not an increase in the tax. In fact, it's just taking the revenue that's generated when development occurs and the value of that land goes up and setting it aside and issuing debt, but non-recourse debt, not debt that is backed by Metro Nashville. It's important to understand that's how it's used here, but for specific improvements that are previously identified that are repaid. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about what those specific improvements are in projects, but I'd like to walk everybody through sort of the typical process. You begin by defining what is that TIF district. So it's not just picked out of the sky. You define it based on a project that you know will move forward, and you establish that base valuation. You freeze at that point in time what that value is, and you have a project that is identified in here in Nashville with a developer who is backing up and guaranteeing that revenue stream should there be a shortfall, and then it's specified for a specific public improvement, whether that might be public parking garage or recreational asset or remediation of an environmental hazard. And that is done so that it's very specific and tied to that project. And then those improvements are made, and the project must be kind of ready to go. Anita and I like to talk about it as the sticks are in the ground. They're ready to build this project. It would go forward forward, but there's a little bit of a financial gap. And for that reason, tax increment financing is used as that mechanism to fund it so that we can leverage those private dollars. As that development occurs, the value increases, and that increment is used to repay that loan. So the TIF loan is repaid and it's completed. So if you were to look at this in terms of allocation, and I'm an economist, so I love charts, and what you see here is a 20-year chart in which you start in the base year and you freeze that value. So that value that was being collected in tax revenue, property tax revenue, is the red bar along the bottom of my chart here, and it continues to be paid to Metro Nashville during the entire time of the TIF project. But then as the TIF project is built and the value of that property increases, the increment, that value, is set aside to repay that TIF loan. So when they build the project, build the public parking, whatever that benefit might be, it is then repaid with those TIF dollars that are coming back in revenue, and any additional increment, which is the yellow bar that you see on this chart, goes back to Metro Nashville. At the time that the TIF loan is retired, MDHA typically amortizes over 15 years. It's never more than 20 years. But that at the time that that loan is retired, the entirety, which is the entire green bar on the far right-hand side of my graphic, shows you that those future taxes are going back to Metro Nashville. Yes.
Just
Councilmember Mendez?
For viewers who are thinking on a 15-year look backwards, what you're describing is the way ideally it would work, but that's not the way it worked in Nashville, right?
Right. So this is the way that the tax increment financing, TIF 101, this is the way that it's worked in the most recent years and has been applied in tax increment financing in Nashville. There are some peculiarities when you do go, and we did take a look back, and this is what Councilmember Chairman Mendez is mentioning. There are some rare off options where public infrastructure was used, and then it comes to Metro Council for approval for those rare off secondary uses for the secondary bond. Is that what you're thinking of?
No, I was thinking about like the AT&T building. You know, it's the red part. You'd have to go back to 1989 to get the red part, and then after, I think the loan for that building was paid off, the increment from the AT&T building was pledged to the baseball stadium.
Right. So
there was a dozen or so properties, and like I agree that that's the way it's supposed to work. But I think people need to keep focused on that's definitely not the way it's worked.
Right. There's the historic history, and I think this is a really important point that the chairman's bringing up here, is that in the past there were some deals where the increment didn't revert immediately back to Metro Nashville as the priorities, and this is what other folks were talking about, as the priorities shifted and there was maybe sometimes a secondary bond issue for like the Sounds Ballpark or the Omni Hotel or the amphitheater, the Riverfront Park and amphitheater, those there was a delay in returning those taxes to Metro Nashville. At this point in time, they have been retired and returned to Metro Nashville, so it's no longer an issue. But there was a point in time from back in the 80s when this would have happened. And I think this leads to an important point, which is that there are critiques of tax increment financing. There is no tool in anybody's wheelhouse that is perfect, and it's important to make note of that. Anita and I spend our time traveling the country and dealing with TIF on a national basis. And we would say, from our perspective, over the last 5 years, there have been adjustments to TIF policy, and some of those adjustments have just been trying to increase transparency to allow all scale of developers to use the tool. And this is sort of an interesting one, because here in Nashville, what we've seen is projects as little as $77,000 to as big as $61 million. So you've actually had some scalability already inherent in your program, which is wonderful to see. But certainly increasing that transparency, doing reports like this, and having the committee participate help to make sure that it is still scalable for all scales of developers. Certainly one of the other things we've seen is a heavy emphasis on infrastructure, making sure it's really used for economic development, that you can see the measure in the results. A lot of focus on transit-centric and some on affordable housing throughout the country. Certainly here in Nashville, we know that there have been no defaults and that the development might not have happened anywhere else in the city. Again, that but-for clause is hard for us to do, but the real question for the jurisdiction is, would you have received the same revenue at that same scale? And in our opinion, as urban economists, we would say that many of the locations of this TIF and the synergies next to additional projects from the private sector and public sector would not have resulted in as large of a tax value coming back to the city in terms of taxes generated, because in these other locations, they're likely to be potentially smaller in scale as well as value over time. And I think it's important to take a moment and just say, what is the use of TIF in Nashville and historically? Again, understanding our study was looking at the last 20 years, but TIF is really directed by mayoral administrations and focusing on what are the needs today, where we have a gap in the marketplace and we need to sort of step up and provide that incentive. In the late 1990s through 2008, major emphasis was placed, which was already mentioned, on residential units, bringing back, improving the market. Downtown population from where our project kind of started in 2000 was about 2,000 residents. And then we're talking to 2020, 14,000 or 15,000 even today, more recent estimates. During the recession, you can see all of a sudden the red bars on the chart on the right-hand side of the graphic start to drop off because residential development halted. And again, the emphasis sort of shifted to, well, what can we do to our urban corridors? Have we thought about those? And then obviously throughout the pickup again, 2013, 2014, we see more residential projects. But in totality, over the 20-year span that Partners for Economic Solutions reviewed tax increment financing here in Metro Nashville, we saw 4,500 new residential units being added, which is impactful. If you think about that and you compare it to what's happening on the commercial side, we like to look at the TIF hotel rooms. Coming out of that recession, there was an emphasis on really encouraging not just commercial activity, but tourism, gaining that visitor stronghold, which Nashville is known for nationally and internationally, and TIF helps shift that. It supported hotel development, accommodated the Music City Center, and added about 2,190 hotel keys. As you can see on the chart, it didn't start really happening until 2014, 2015, 2016. So you can see that shift. We were once about really encouraging residential, and now here at Nashville has shifted to be encouraging sort of the tourism visitor side historically. I'm going to turn it over to Anita Morrison to talk a little bit about the fiscal impact model and get into the methodology that was used.
Yes.
These slides will be provided and will be available on the MDHA website. And at the end of the slideshow, we have a QR code for committee members and anyone else who's streaming to go ahead and take a look at the detailed report with appendices.
Okay, so we were asked to look at creating a fiscal impact model that quantified the revenues and expenditures from the general fund, generally on the operating side. And so we looked at all of the projects that had been funded with TIF dollars over the life of the program, and estimated the annual revenues generated by those TIF projects. So it's not just property taxes, but it's also sales taxes, business taxes, wheel taxes, the whole range of revenue sources for Metro government. And we associated estimated those for each of these projects going forward. And then on the expenditure side, we used an approach that's used in modeling nationwide, looking at the average cost of providing services. So we went through Metro budget for 2021 and went through line item by line item and then allocated those dollars to the populations that they serve. So we worked with and we met with the police department, the fire department, and other agencies to get their inputs as to make that as realistic as possible. So the allocation was to residents, workers who were sort of a surrogate for the business community, and then the visitors that frequent Nashville. So as Abby mentioned, 76 projects ranging from $77,000 up to $61 million, so a real range of projects. And what we found was that on an annual basis, those projects projects are generating $7.2 million in net new revenues to Metro government. That compares the new expenditure, or the new revenues, to the associated expenditures of serving the school children and the visitors and the businesses in the community. So going district by district, you will see there are some that have negative numbers. So East Bank, Phillips Jackson, and Skyline had negative impacts where expenditures were higher than the net new revenues. And that's because they're very heavily oriented to residential developments. And the way Metro government's finances are set up, we cross-subsidize the residential activities like schools in particular with the dollars that we get from commercial businesses. And so it's a deliberate strategy. We assess at a higher level, a higher percentage of the value for commercial properties and a lower percentage for residential properties, specifically to make sure we had that cross-subsidy going to reduce the burden on the residential taxpayer. So these were also areas generally with lower property values, and in the case of Phillips Jackson, it was one of those where the revenues, as the initial loans were repaid, the revenues were reallocated to support the Sounds ballpark, and that's part of why you have a negative number there. It would probably be positive over the life of the project, but for the ballpark. Okay. So then in addition to general fund revenues, there are special purpose funds.
Can I ask one question on that last slide? The One Bellevue Place, is that a...
Oh, okay, so One Bellevue Place was a TIF, but it was issued by the Industrial Development Board rather than MDHA. That was the one outlier of the ones we looked at.
We still evaluated it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So then, in addition to general fund operating revenues, we looked at, there are a number of special purpose funds that we didn't consider because they are designed to pay for themselves. So water fees are set to pay the costs of providing and treating water. But there were a couple that were very specifically important from our analysis. The first is the special purpose tourism dollars that are generated by hotel and sales taxes to support tourism activities and promotion particularly. And then that was $10.2 million annually coming from the hotels and the other investments supported by TIF. And then another $11.3 million annually to repay capital debt incurred by Metro government. So that reduces the burden on the individual taxpayer by generating new sources of funds. So the fiscal story is really not the reason we do TIF. It's not that's not why it exists. We do TIF to spur redevelopment, to encourage private investment, to support new projects. And the TIF, the fiscal impact is nice that we get a positive return, but it's not the whole story. So what we've seen in leveraging private investment is, if you just look at this 2000 to 2021 time period, the core of Nashville has added 6,700 new apartments, over 2,100 new condominiums, about 6,000 new hotel rooms, 3.2 million square feet of office space, and about 200,000 square feet of new retail space. So really very substantial investments and transformations in downtown Nashville. And on the fiscal side, though, what you also see is that it's not just the values returned by the TIF projects themselves, which is what we focused on in getting that $7.2 million annual estimate. What happens is each project increases the value of properties around it. It enhances the value of the rest of the property on the block. And so I will, one of the things we saw in total was that the value of properties went up 1,200% over that time period. At the same time, that metro-wide, the values were going up 360%. So really an order of magnitude difference in the impact of the TIF projects. So with that, I'll let Abby walk through some of the districts for you to illustrate the impacts we've seen.
So we took a look at the Arts Center district, and we looked at, again, on the left-hand side of the map, you'll see the detailed timeline of all of the TIF projects. And on the right-hand side, the grade blocks that you see that are raised up on the map are the actual boundaries of the Arts Center TIF district and redevelopment plan approval. And then in black, outlined on top of each of these blocks, is the TIF project itself. The remainder of the block is outlined in a color. So for example, Ash McNeil is shown in black as the square in the bottom right-hand section of that block, but the remainder of the block, which is in yellow, we capture the value of that. So not to capture the value of the actual TIF project itself, but the properties that surround it, that are adjacent to it, that are benefiting from that valuation. And so we took that spatial representation of the TIF loan activity and looked at it over a 20-year span to understand what was happening. And so for each district, we've provided you with not only what's happening within the district, which is the darker red color on the right-hand side of the map, but also the light pink or mauve color, which that salmon color represents the buffer, which is 500 feet from the boundary of the end of the block. And so we took a look at what was happening in the buffer outside and what was happening in the district itself, and then compared that in an annual way to the annual average growth that we have for Nashville at large. So you'll see over the entire 20-year period on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that the Arts Center performed at 17.7% annually in terms of growth for the value of the properties and the assessed appraised values, whereas Nashville Metro was at 7.9%. Interestingly enough, you can see that what's happening in the chart, and it's a little hard to tell, but it's about the Arts Center district itself was at a value of $108 million, and it went to $2.8 billion by 2021. So you can see that magnitude of jump, whereas the buffer went from $193 million to $2.3 billion. That gives you a sense of scale. To kind of break it down a little bit further, this is just a map that shows the value per acre. So starting in 2001, what's the value of each acre of land prior to that? And if you had, then as the Laurel House comes online and as these projects are built out, then you can see the values improve and increase. There's the velocity in the gulch, the icon, and as the value of those projects come in, you can see the redevelopment occur over time and the valuation over the years of the 20-year period impacting not just the property that it's within, but the properties next door. And so this level of detail is available for each of the districts that we evaluated, and it is in the appendice of our report, which we'll make available at the end of the slideshow. But just to walk through it a little more quickly on the other districts, the Capital Mall District went from $700 million in the district itself up to $6 billion. It had an 11.4% annual growth rate compared to Metro Nashville at that 7.9%. Rutledge Hill, for example, was one of the biggest winners. It went from $77.6 million up to $2.3 billion. As you can imagine, it benefited from adjacency to other TIF districts and that clustering that we talked about and that synergy that you gain in valuation improvement from that. But it went up the largest at 18.4% annually over that 20-year period, compared again to Nashville's Metro's only 7.9%. As we look at East Bank, we understand that this was at a lower point, $57.7 million in the 2001 valuation, up to $745 million, and you can see the 4 projects that were done with TIF loan proceeds. Phillips Jackson is a project where they increased about 16.1%, just slightly behind what was done at Rutledge Hill, but here it started with a much lower base of the $76.7 million up to $1.5 billion, and you can see that The buffer that's in the salmon color went from 139.2 to 897.8 million in terms of value. And then Jefferson Street, which Anita mentioned, already has just the one project that's been done, an annual increase of about 11.4% from 10.8 million all the way up to 93.4. And so you can see the valuation really kind of climbs as you would expect that the investment. Now Skyline only has one project on it, and we anticipate that it will jump in value over the next future years, but currently it went from 19 to 101 million during that time period. But basically we took a look at the value of all of the districts over time just to kind of get a sense of in 2001 where it started and then how it grew, just like we looked at the rest of it. Obviously, there's a lot of projects to be talked about, 76 projects, so you're going to see the value increase. What's interesting is to see the ones that increase more than the others and to see the value of that tool being used. But we would be remiss if we didn't say that we wanted to compare that to comparable things that were happening in Nashville itself. So we looked at Wedgwood and Lafayette. Yeah, Lafayette, which where I'm from in upstate New York is Lafayette, so I apologize for me messing that up. I'm a New Yorker. But Wedgwood and these, we took a look at them because we really wanted to understand. Obviously, as you can see on the bottom of this chart, Nashville itself is performing not quite as well as any of the TIF districts or the comparable areas, and we're certainly outperforming those. When we look at Murfreesboro and Charlotte and the like, we can see that, again, the TIF districts, in the most part, outperform them and definitely outperformed Metro Nashville during that 20-year period. Nothing too surprising, but interesting to see how they track well with what we would expect in terms of the focus and the goals. And I'll turn it back to Anita.
And then I just wanted to share our perspective as economists of what we've seen here in downtown Nashville and the impacts, the implications of the TIF investments that you've made over time. I think Mayor Purcell already mentioned the investments that were made in housing in 1996 with the Cumberland initially that helped to prove that there was a market for downtown housing, which hadn't really been settled yet at that point. And then we saw affordable housing being built, one new project, and then from 2000 on, each of the residential projects was required to have a mixed income element to their offerings. And so that was, again, helping to demonstrate to the market that wealthy people would not resist living with people with lower incomes, that it was possible to mix incomes within a building and not suffer financially. Historic preservation was a major orientation, a major priority for MDHA over time. 19 historic buildings were preserved, including Ryman Auditorium, the Hermitage Hotel, and a whole range of smaller buildings. You're now looking at a really thriving downtown that is the envy of many of your peer cities, and that happened for a number of different reasons. The Music City Center, of course, pivotal. The fact that your public facilities are clustered is very important. The enhancement of the public realm and the mixing of uses all work together to create a very successful downtown revitalization strategy. So in the clustering, all of these buildings within walking distance of each other create this pedestrian environment that's very appealing to tourists, but it's also very appealing to the locals as well. And then the investments were made in the Omni Hotel, the Country Music Hall of Fame, and more recently in the National Museum of African American Music. Those have helped to generate more activity and more reasons to come downtown consistently. The mix of uses is just essential to a thriving, active downtown, and the residents and the hotel guests that have been brought in supplement the office workers and really make the thriving restaurants and entertainment venues work. And then finally, MDHA has strict design guidelines that they impose on projects that get TIF funding, and that sort of up the ante or up the level of enhancements of public realm improvements. And that plus new public open spaces like the riverfront amphitheater have been really very helpful in improving the quality of life for Nashvillians and for visitors alike. So with that, we'd be happy to take questions, and this is the QR code we were talking about, that if you scan that, you can then link directly to the MDHA website where the report will be available, as well as other TIF materials. So with that, we'd be happy to take questions.
Committee members or council members who are here, any questions? Yeah. Charles Robert. Unfortunately for the TV, it won't pick up.
What I've always aspired to do, to speak from the floor of the council chambers. Mine is more a statement than a question. I'd say thank you. I mean, obviously a tremendous amount of work went into this. I would say thank you to you all. Thank you to Councilman Mendez for spearheading this, and to Mayor Purcell and Mr. White and Joe Kane for continuing this work and to getting us where we are. What I really liked about your presentation was both the kind of the return on investment, right? I mean, the economic development and the economic impact that this has created. But as you said, that's not the whole story. I mean, you take the flip side. I mean, I think what's remarkable about what we have in Nashville is that we have had the ability to make some really proprietary investments where we can show a return on investment. But as we know, and MDHA knows, that's not the whole story, right? The government gets to think bigger than that. You know, they get to borrow money at a 40-year amortization. They get to borrow money at a very low cost of interest. So they get the ability to think kind of beyond what produces a quick return on investment and think about what are the things that we want to incentivize, whether that's residential units downtown in the early 2000s to hotel rooms to public facilities. And at least what I think what the committee ultimately recommended, and I think your report affirms and the work of MDHA continues, is TIF can be a really powerful tool when directed at what it is that you want to incentivize. And I'm so happy to hear about MDHA and kind of just the four priorities on that. And I guess if I have one question, I think it was what you said on the kind of the but-for test. It is really easy in hindsight to come back and say, oh, well, of course all this would have happened, right? We never needed to do that. Yeah. The only time I think you can really do that but-for test is the work that Joe Kane does, kind of project in and project out, which is really that but-for determination is made in the moment, right? When you're analyzing it, saying, would this project actually go forward and go forward in the way that we want it to go forward if it didn't have this TIF component? And I assume that would be true. So again, I really appreciate this work by everybody, and so glad to see it.
Thanks.
I've already hit the QR code, so now I've got plenty to read.
Anybody else?
Did you?
Let me ask just a couple of questions,
sure.
and then just a few observations, really, because I think council members are going to watch this video as we move on to the future, and just a couple things I want to stick in. But the question that I'd start with is, so based on, I mean, this is a little tongue-in-cheek, but based on the report, we should do unlimited amounts of tax increment financing.
Well, I'm not sure we said that. I'm pretty certain we wouldn't say that.
So what?
I think it has to be, and this is where I was talking about the critiques of TIF, and I think this is what I'm sure the chairman is thinking of, is that it really needs to be tailored to the specifics of the goals that you're trying to reach and making sure that project is tying to those goals. And so when we looked back on some of the deals being done, and Matt and Joe can tell you that MDHA, that we called them and asked them pretty specific questions. What was this tied to? What was the public improvement, to understand that those connections were being made? And I think it is right that they do a significant amount of due diligence, but it's important to understand that TIF is not going to work in every project, and certainly we have reservations about a strictly residential and how the residential can work, and I'll let Anita say a little more about
Right.
how there are misgivings on that side.
Yeah, I think the but-for clause, though difficult to impose, is really a critical one in trying to decide how to prioritize using this tool, not willy-nilly for every project, but going through the financials and understanding the real details about what kind of infrastructure and how much could the project support with the private dollars available from the revenues, the rent revenues and the rest. But on the residential side, I think we do have some challenges, particularly on affordable housing using TIF, because the individual affordable housing development doesn't generate enough in property taxes typically to make up for the gap between the costs and the revenues that come in from rents, but it can be a useful adjunct to low-income housing tax credits and other subsidy programs, grant programs that make a big portion of the gap, but not quite all of it. And so TIF dollars could, in fact, help put them over the top, and particularly if you thought in terms of TIF dollars on a small cluster of properties as opposed to just the one single affordable development. But,
So following up on that, as economists, let me ask you this. I understand that I always forget what GFOA is, Government Finance Officer Association, GFOA. I understand that they have literature that says it's a best practice for municipalities to decide the dollar amount of TIF that they want to issue and then have priorities about what that is going to be for, so there's predictability over some number of years about what that's going to be, because as your charts illustrated, for the first 10, 15, 18 years, you're just going to get the pre-development base tax. From the economist's point of view, do you agree with that?
I think it's a worthy goal, and it's a best practice, but in reality, development happens in waves, and so it may not be possible to spread it out evenly over each year, and you want to be opportunistic in some sense as to when the market is right, when the projects come together, the developer comes to you, you want to be able to respond, not just within a fixed amount.
I think you have to be careful not to hamper the market with an audible goal to have accountability and predictability, in that this tool isn't going to provide that, whereas like traditional geo bond financing and things like that would definitely be a best practice to have a budgetary amount that's something predictable for the future. Something like a TIF, because it's responding to market conditions, needs to be a little bit more flexible, but not be overly used for every project that comes down the pike, but for specific ones that meet those needs. And here, like it's done in Nashville, tied to a redevelopment plan that has an overarching 30-year plan, and you're kind of checking off the list of things that you want to do in that plan time period, and you're doing 3 or 4 projects over that time period. I think that, to me, seems like a better way to measure it. It might be that it's tied back to the plan, tied back to the goals, less tied back to a specific number, per se. And there was a question over here.
So just to follow up, let me see if this is closer. Would you agree that there should be, if not a specific number, because it's hard to hit the target dead on the head, that it would be a best practice to have anticipated range over a period of time?
I think as long as you can retain some flexibility to respond to the opportunities as they arise.
You just need to be reasonable that it would be, because the evaluations that you've seen here, and you've had such a boom economy, if you were to have established that 10 years ago, I could see a place where you would have missed out on several deals and might not have shifted over to the hotel development had you had a limit, because what you saw on the residential side wouldn't be nearly what it would have been on the commercial side in terms of those numbers. So I think you just have to be cautious about that piece of it. But yeah, I could see where that would be. And were you asking a clarifying question? Yeah.
Yes, I have a couple questions, and I first have to preface it, but I'm a neophyte on this. I'm trying to learn, and so my questions may not be at the highest level. But one of the things you mentioned was market timing. And so when you mention market timing, it brings the question to my mind, how long would this process take? Because if I'm trying to respond quickly, but how long if a TIF takes 2 or 3 years to do that, that market may have come and gone. So can you give me some relationship to timing of how long it would take for a TIF project?
Yes, I think the actual TIF decisions, Joe, are fairly quick, 6 months to a year.
Inside a district.
Yeah.
Yes, within inside of an existing redevelopment district. That it's essentially, the developer will come with a proposal, and you'll negotiate to make sure you get the kind of improvements you want and identify what can be covered with TIF and what cannot be covered and how much TIF would be generated. But then it's just negotiating the terms of the loan agreements. So that should take less than a year, and generally I think that's consistent with the other kinds of financing that the developers are trying to line up. We have some programs like the low-income housing tax credits that are only issued once a year, and if you miss that round, you're in trouble. You're put off for another year, but that's not the case with tax increment financing.
Okay, and then my second question is, what's the downside? Why would we not do a TIF?
All right. So I think, if you do end up subsidizing projects that didn't, in fact, meet your priorities or need the TIF, you might be trading away some of your future revenues that you could use for your general fund priorities. So that's one of the elements. But and that's why we always emphasize this but-for category.
And in some jurisdictions, they don't have the scalability that you have here in Nashville, and so it's just going to larger developers. But here you've had smaller developers take advantage of it because there is so much transparency. There's an annual report that MDHA puts out, and so everybody kind of knows about the tool. It's well publicized, and it's been critiqued and reviewed and looked at. And for that reason, as opposed to other places that Anita and I travel to, we don't have as many concerns as we might have in terms of that. And you've never had a default, which is important to state.
Yeah, so it's set up, sorry, knock on wood. Yes, it's set up as a loan to the project with the developer responsible for repaying if the project doesn't generate enough in TIF revenues. That's a pretty conservative approach to TIF investments, and I think it's served you well. And the fact that they're bank loans and not just debt through bonding, the hurdles are much lower. The issuance costs and all the things the fees that come with a bond are not necessarily incurred in these smaller projects where you really just go to your local bank and you work the agreement. Yeah.
So that brings me up the question of lien. What's first, what's second, what's third?
The mortgage is always first, and then this is
There's not really. There's not really.
Property taxes.
Yeah, it's.
Property taxes come before the mortgage.
Yeah, property taxes are first.
You're right.
They're first.
Yes, right. But to make up a gap from those property taxes, that would come after the mortgage, typically. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the observation, so the work that you guys were asked to do was teed up by legislation from 2019 when MDHA redevelopment district TIF was the only game in town.
Right.
And since then, and you mentioned from the inception of TIF loans until now, the biggest loan was $61 million. I assume that was the Omni.
Yeah,
correct.
And And since then, we've done an IDB TIF that's nearly 3 times that size, $175 million TIF for Oracle. And there's talk of doing a several $100 million TIF for non-stadium East Bank development. So council members and everybody in finance and the mayor's office are going to have to keep in mind that between Oracle and what's talked about potentially for the East Bank, in 2 TIF situations, we might exceed the total amount of MDHA TIF loans ever made in 35 years. And that was the nature of my question about at least some broad framework about, like, if we're gonna exceed the total amount of TIF loans ever with 2 projects, like, my view personally is there should be some broad strokes. Are we trying to have $50 million a year worth of property taxes go to TIF loans, $100 million, $150 million? And I would assume you guys would agree that while you were asked to look at MDHA redevelopment district TIF, if we're going to blend in spot TIFs by IDB, we should have some consensus about what the total amount of property tax revenue we're trying to commit to TIF is over some time period, knowing it might change over time, knowing we have to be responsive, but we ought to be able to give them $10, $20 million of what we want to, how much property tax revenue we want to have going to TIF. I assume you all would agree with that?
I don't know. That's a tough call. I always think of theater sales, right? Like, I always think, my God, no movie can earn as much as it's moved, but the value of the tickets and the price of the tickets keep going up, so the number keeps going up. But is it really a big change, and how many people are going to the movies, or is it? I don't know. That's hard for me in terms of numbers. Anita,
I guess, with an Oracle, the scale is sort of mind-boggling, but it is bringing a whole new industry and several thousand jobs to the community. So you probably evaluate it differently than a project that was moving people around within the city. Yeah.
So then that gets us back to $175 million for Oracle, several $100 million for East Bank, building roads and stuff, and like that's just a speed bump. It's all good, like undo unlimited TIF.
I think because TIF is tied to the increment of the project, it doesn't feel like it's just it's not a straight subsidy. It's not a pilot or a payment in lieu of taxes. It's a different animal. And I guess from that perspective, if I knew the deal and the structure of the deal, then you could evaluate it on each deal, but to evaluate it outside of that's harder to know. I don't want to hamstring Metro Nashville. You're very big, you're a boom town, your economy's doing great, so I wouldn't want to go on record and say that.
Well, I appreciate that. And then the only other observation, and we talked, I had the benefit of a preview of this, which I appreciate. And I do think a bunch of the hotels were going to be built anyway. And so the counting that as impact revenue is a challenge for me. But I really do, I appreciate the methodology. I appreciate all the work everybody's done on this.
We appreciate your time, and we appreciate the committee spending the time to look into this, because a lot of times people don't read our reports. It's certainly not down to the appendix tables, but I know all of you folks will, and I know the chairman will, because he's interested in it. And I appreciate that personally, really.
All right, thank you. I guess from the committee perspective, we thought we were done 3 years ago, but I think we're really, really done now. So thanks again, guys, for serving on the committee. And we'll be, you guys want to say anything else?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, everybody.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.